I'm Jean Wagaman, Vice President of Historical Society. I'd like to welcome all of you here this evening on this lovely, lovely night. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight, and I've known Joe since he was a babe in his mother's arms. His mother is with us tonight, back there, Gloria Hines. And Joe is married, and his wife's name is Jody. And they have two wonderful sons, Ethan and Drew is with us here tonight, so we're happy to have him. And Joe has been an asset to the Grove City community. I can't tell you how many projects he's been involved in, how much charity work he has done. He was on the board of the Grove City Christian Academy. He was also on the board of Grove City Hospital. He's a very strong supporter of United Way. And am I right, Joe, that you have 100% participation of your employees? And I think it's because Joe gives them a little incentive to donate. And I know he's been very generous to the YMCA. He's been on a couple mission trips, one of them to Africa and Mexico, Guatemala. Okay, and so he is an extremely brilliant young man. And like I said, I've known him forever. He graduated from Mercyhurst College with a degree in business, and everyone thought, boy, he's a lucky guy. All he has to do is graduate and come work for his dad. Not. His dad said, you have to get a job. So he wouldn't let him work at Hines, and then he had to go get a job. And the obedient son he is, he listened to his dad, and he went to Colorado and was very successful out there. And after a few years, decided he was ready to come back and start to get groomed to take over at Pine Instrument. So the main job he had was kind of being in charge of the Ohio plant of Pine Instrument, and he kept saying he liked middle management. He didn't like top management, he liked middle management. And after a couple years, to the disappointment of his parents, he informed them that he really didn't want to take over Pine Instrument, that he didn't want to be responsible for the livelihood of all those families, and he was going back to Colorado. So, of course, it was his decision, and his parents supported him in whatever he wanted to do. So he went back to Colorado, and after a few years of learning more business expertise and a little more maturity, he decided to come back and try Pine Instrument again. And that was many years ago, and as you all know, he was a very successful businessman and has just helped Grove City in tremendous ways. So we're very happy to have Joe, and he's going to tell you about the history and what they actually do out there on Main Street. Joe?
Okay, I'm going to start with what we do now, because then that helps me go backwards back into the history and come forward. Okay, so I'm going to start with, I'll pass some of this stuff around, but also at the end you can come up and look at all these different things, different parts, things that we make. But I will start with doing Pine. When my dad started Pine in 62, he would say back then he made more money from the chips that came off the machines that went to recycling than he made off the part that was actually sold to Joy Manufacturing, which was his primary customer at the time. And so he really started as a contract machine shop, making parts for Joy was the big part of the initial part of the business. And the electronics, the asphalt, and the EChem all came about because of relationships he had. So he was in college, worked in the chemistry department at the University of Minnesota. And if you look the banners out here as you came in, that is a historical perspective of the science of electrochemistry. And my father got in on the early part of that science because he worked in the chemistry department while that was happening in the world. And later in life, 10 years after college, maybe, the university needed more equipment, and they contacted my dad about making equipment for the electrochemical testing industry. And that's how that whole business started and grew. So I'll go through more of that history of that, but that's what that EChem. EChem stands for electrochemistry, and we make rotating electrodes that chemists use to analyze properties of solutions. And that's all I can say about that. A lot about chemistry. Asphalt, so my dad worked at ArcWeld. How he got to Grove City was through ArcWeld. And while he was at ArcWeld, he was helping with the design of asphalt testing equipment, among other things. He left ArcWeld and started Pine, and one of the first things he did was he designed some asphalt testing equipment. And that was in '63 time frame, and then about 1968 is when the state of Pennsylvania said everyone needs to start testing asphalt in a particular way. And so then he sort of became seated in the asphalt testing industry. And then contract manufacturing started again as machining for Joy Manufacturing. It transitioned into making electronic control boxes for the underground miners for Joy. There was a gentleman in Grove City that worked for Joy who knew my father, and my father was an electrical engineer, and so he suggested that my dad talk with Joy about producing electronic control boxes for them. So then that's how all of the electronics part of the business got started. So the initial thing of doing contract machining didn't last very long because these other things came about within the first 8 years, and then sort of the contract machining part of the business left. So at any point through this, stop and ask me questions. I'll be happy to answer them. So I'm going to start by going through Hines specific products. These are products that leave Grove City with Hines name on it. So we export all over the world. We make, maybe a good example, the item that tests your blood sugar. Who's a diabetic in the room? You can poke your finger. Okay, inside that little device is a pattern electrode that analyzes your blood. That's the same as this little thing right here, except that's a little bigger version. So Pine makes these that chemists use for studying chemistry in a lab. We also make the instrument that thing plugs into that analyzes all the data that goes in with that. So that's a stationary form of electrochemistry. This line right here is a line of electrodes that this device here is a rotator. So this is a glorified mixer, and it spins an electrode that has like a glassy carbon or a gold tip on it, and so it's in solution and spinning, and the mathematics of the solution flow, the chemists use that to understand what's happening with that particular product in that chemistry bath. So we make a whole series of different electrodes that you can look at. This one here is, you'll see this one has a gold ring in it. Oh, thank you. So I'm going to pass this around. This one has, so our machinist here in Grove City will make this part, and it's got a stainless steel shaft in the center, and then there's a piece of Teflon, and then there's a small solid gold ring, and then a little ring of glassy carbon inside there. So we have 4 machinists here in Grove City that make this part. We're pretty much the only people in the world that make it. It's not a huge market because there's only 4 people making it. So there's not a whole lot of competition, but it is something totally unique that we.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Something totally unique we do here in Grove City. But you can go ahead and touch this. Unfortunately, this is a scrap one, so a lot of effort and a lot of scrap. But so electrochemistry, this is the instrumentation here that would plug into these different electrodes that would do all the analysis of the chemistry, the chemical reactions that are going on. We have several chemists in our North Carolina office that work on writing software that goes into all the analysis of that product. Next over here we have asphalt testing equipment. So I said in 1963 timeframe was the first asphalt tester that my dad designed. He designed, I have another picture from 1994, and then this machine here was designed in about 2007. And we are one of the 2 manufacturers of that type of asphalt testing equipment in the United States. Again, not a super huge market, so not a lot of competition. But. And then we make a sample of asphalt in the laboratory that predicts the asphalt's performance in the field on the road. And then that sample of asphalt is put into this machine here, which has 3 big steel wheels in it, and it mimics the ruts you see on a road. You see, you get that. So that those machines in the center are simulating the rutting effect of asphalt on the road. When they design an asphalt pavement, the technician in the lab will analyze the rock pile they have outside, and they measure each rock individually. They'll measure hundreds of rocks so they can characterize the sort of the elongarity of it, the fractured faces, how broken the rock is. And so they spend a lot of time analyzing the rocks to understand how well that will perform in an asphalt pavement. And this is the inside of the machine that we made that uses a camera and takes a picture of every rock and then mathematically gives the technician the characteristics of that piece of aggregate so that they don't have to do that by hand. That was pretty much in the initial work of that was done by a professor in Washington State, and then I put that product and commercialized it. So that's kind of a bit about sort of what we do. Hines is 115 employees. There are about 60 people involved in making products for other manufacturers. So that would be, there are 60 people involved in contract manufacturing. They're making something that is used by Instron in one of Instron's machines. So they're making a circuit board like this that we would sell to Instron. Instron would put it in their machine. The other 50 people, 55 people in the company are working on either something related to either the asphalt product that has our name on it or the EChem product that has our name on it. Yes?
The Instron piece, is that your design or is that their design?
It's all their design.
Okay.
All their design. So in contract manufacturing, and we make parts for Instron, we make parts for JLG. They make the orange boom lifts and scissor lifts you see at all the construction sites. We make boards for JLG, which are all their design. We're just a subcontractor putting that product. So we buy all the parts in the board, the bare board, and put that together for them, and then test it and send it off. So we don't do any of that. With design work comes liability. And so we don't hold the liability if their product fails, because it's theirs.
Is that all hand soldered work?
No, this would all be machine soldered, mostly. We did an analysis a couple years ago. We hand solder about 1.5 million joints a year, and that's a lot of a lot of hand solder. Yes.
Just 10.
Oh. Well, let me get. So I'm going to go through some history stuff. So this is the first building. This is what is now Pro City Pools, out on 208 and 208 North Liberty Road. You were only in there about a year and a half, I think, they were in that first building. That would have been 1962 into 1963. In 1963, my dad acquired a patent from a guy that had made up the bell that would be on the back of a truck. So when the truck backs up, the bell would chime. And so you can't see it on here, but it says Pine Instrument Company up there on that wheel. So That's the only photos I have of that thing, and I'm not sure how many were ever sold because I don't see hardly any records on it. So electronic bells probably came along pretty quick after that, and so it had a quick death. You know.
So do you have any of the old stuff around at all? Or?
Yeah, I do have one of those old
good.
parts.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So so they went from that corner place back on Oak Street. Oak Street's right across from the high school there. The building that is way back against the tracks. I remember as a kid standing on the loading dock, and the tracks weren't 10 feet away, it seemed like, and the trains were just sitting right by there. I don't know why you guys wouldn't play back there. It was pretty close. You would stand right there by that garage door, and the train was right there. So here at Oak Street, from the records I can tell, there was 3, maybe 5 employees that were in the business at that time. The early records show a lot of people coming in and out, a lot of people working part-time. There just wasn't a whole lot of work. So people came in and out. So here is one of the early asphalt testers that he produced, and this one up here is also an early asphalt tester. Pine prides itself on building equipment that'll last a long time, and so this machine here, the last one of these was built in 1967, and we are still servicing some of those in use today. So they're still out there running. They're just mechanically strong, and they last. They just keep lasting. So from 65 we go up. I'm jumping up to 72. This is the building of what we call 101 Industrial Drive out there. So the building, I go back through the records that I have, and my dad found this company that supplied, those walls are cedar. The inside and the outside of the building are the same board. It is 5-inch thick cedar, and it's all tongue and grooved, and the panels were put together and then stood up. And he has all the original literature from when he designed and laid out the building. And then you can see they were putting the roof trusses up. So that all occurred in 1972. So when you go by the building today, you're looking at that's the same wood from 72. I'm going to cover it up soon because it's pretty old and it really needs new siding bad. If you get up close to it, it needs new siding really bad. So through this period, all 3 of those things I talked about were going on. Asphalt equipment was going on, E-Chem equipment was going on, and the contract manufacturing. Each of those businesses just sort of kept moving along through this whole time frame. Nothing new was really occurring. It was just each one of those was just growing on its own a little bit over time as it went along. Here is 1974. I picked this one because that was our first company picnic here in 1974. And you can see that this, on top of they're building circuit boards, and I'm assuming those were circuit boards for Joy Manufacturing. So I want to pass these out now. So part of this is to help you understand why I use the example, your IBM typewriter was so much bigger than your cell phone. So in this tray are parts that would have been of that era. And this contains parts for today. And this is why your cell phone is the size it is. So you can look at that, and that gives you a comparison of yesterday's electronics and today's electronics. And if you you can look at some of these later, but these boards, so boards today, some parts cannot be reduced because of the power they use, or there's different elements to it, but there are parts inside of here that are the tiny ones in there. Some of the parts we put down are 2,000ths by 4,000ths of an inch, and they're put down robotically, and it's an amazing process to watch. But our cell phones, so I've seen equipment that'll build cell phones, and it sounds like machine guns. It's putting down 10,000 parts an hour, just building cell phones incredibly fast. It's just like a machine gun shooting parts down onto the board. So that helps you understand why things got so much smaller and so much more powerful. This board here, this is actually a vintage of close to a 1970s circuit board. We made a lot of boards for Joy that were in the underground mines. So the whole board was encapsulated in rubber. There would be just the wires are all cut off right here, but there would just be wires coming out that would end up being attached to the piece of equipment that was in. So this would come back from the mine to be repaired, and the boxes were orange. Joy has a very specific Joy orange color. And so when I was in high school, the boxes would come in from the mines and they would be incredibly dirty. And I was always given the job of cleaning the boxes out. And they were a mess. They were a real mess. And then they'd pull the boards out, repair the boards. And what they'd have to do is use probes and figure out what part was bad, and then cut the rubber out, replace the part, and then refill it up. And then go back into a box and go back out to the mines. This piece here, this Pine Potentiostat RDE2, that is the instrument that hooks up to a rotator that analyzes the chemistry. So this is the instrument that all of that data feeds into and then goes around. And this is an early version here of what this rotator here looks like. That's a very early version of that. So move to 75. This is Main Street. Remember the two-story building out on Main Street? For years they sold apples. It was the old Ford, I think it was a Ford used car dealership. It had the big canopy out by the road for many
They sell
years.
tractors and stuff in there too?
And for years the apple guy sold apples there. This little piece of road right here is the piece coming out right by Burger King. So if you exit Burger King, that you were looking straight at that building on Main Street. So that building, when my dad bought the land from the Industrial Development Corporation on Industrial Drive, the piece that he got extended way down into what is today GE. And when they wanted to develop that big building, they wanted him to give up that land. So they bought the chunk that the Main Street building was on, and he did a swap. So he got the Main Street building and he gave up the property on Industrial that was related to GE. A little interesting side note for GE there. So GE is all Pine Township except for about 100 feet by 25. Which is just a little piece of the borough, which is the piece my dad had. And then the rest of it's Pine Township. But that's the borough piece they got. So in this building, it was all set up for electronics. There's the Joy Orange, you can see it. And just by the hundreds and hundreds, the Joy boxes went through the facility. They were making a lot of boxes. My two sisters and I worked in there, starting in high school, and worked every day and building different things when we weren't at home, working at the kitchen table and building circuit boards. So Pine has its own business control software. When I was in school, I studied a theory called MRP, Material Requirements Planning. Most manufacturing facilities in the world use a version of MRP as part of their control system. It helps make sure that all the material, the people, and the machine time are at the right place at the right time. And through my schooling, I came across this and I studied this theory. And at the same time, my dad was starting to read about this same sort of material control software. And he pulled two guys together, Andy and Jeff, and he decided he was going to write his own software package to do this theory. He bought the textbook that I had at college. He bought the textbook and read the textbook and said, we're going to do this and write it ourselves. So in 1980, that started. And a huge part of Pine's success is that we control all of our business software ourselves. My dad took my accounting 101 textbook and used that to help write the accounting module that's in our system. And it controls everything from all of accounting, payroll, for all of purchasing and all of maintenance, and all of our equipment, and all of our personnel records, and all of our production records, all of our customer records. Everything is compiled into
This is
one.
like a homegrown SAP?
Yes,
SAP?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yes. The difference being, and I work, some of the employers I work for outside of Pine, I work with one that had SAP, one that had Oracle. I got certified in the theory of this, in the application of this theory, and so I got exposed to a lot of different systems. And the guts of MRP are the same. It's math. You all do the math the same. It's not a new algorithm. They all use the same algorithm. It's an application of that algorithm. The benefit that we have is that our software writers work for us. If we want a button in a different place, we put a button in a different place. If we want, things to flow through, we don't have to worry about getting one program to talk to another program to talk to another program. We have it all in one central housing of software. And so we have one guy that writes for us full time, and all he does is our business control software, and he's been doing it, I think, 32 years. Something like that.
Can you sell this?
We sold early on. They sold it, yes, and then that was more headache than it was worth, because we ended up. It's so much work to customize software, and writing it for ourselves was a full-time job, and it really made our business so much stronger that we were able to do that. So we run with basically world-class software on a 115 people platform, and our only ongoing cost is having a software writer on staff. So my dad and I sort of came into this whole thing at the same time, right as I was going through school, and they were developing this. And
Joe, what language was it originally written in?
I don't know that. I can tell you an interesting story related to that, though. Other piece of paper I found. So my dad bought a computer from IBM, and I know the one they used was a PDP-11, but he had bought one early on from IBM, and it didn't perform the way IBM had promised. And I have all these letters that he wrote to IBM, and they actually took it back and refunded his money.
My guess is it would probably, in that era, would probably been Fortran.
Probably,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I can't say for sure, but
Either Fortran or COBOL.
yeah,
Yeah.
there were stacks and stacks.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My dad didn't do any of the writing. He just did the design, and then he had the code writer do all the writing.
No, I don't think so.
So it started out as a dumb terminal process, and we have migrated over into a Windows environment now.
No, I know in the 76, 77.
So here's Industrial Job Edition, 1987. We added a building sort of behind a little bit to the left of our 101 building. We call that building, for us, that's called Building 3. It's about 8,000 feet on the first floor, about 4,000 feet in the basement level. And we started a theme going, we have always had really good Christmas parties. They were at my parents' house for many, many years. I think up until 1987 they moved. So, 1987 we built the building, we had a Christmas party in it before we moved in.
Yeah.
That was the first official act of that building, was to have a Christmas party in our building. Here's 1994. So I mentioned how we were in the asphalt business, and we may have employed 3 to 4 people maybe a year building asphalt equipment up until this point. In 1994, we introduced this machine, this machine was designed to the spec of the federal government. The federal government issued out an RFQ, and we were one of the people that bid to produce this asphalt testing equipment. Today, we employ about 25 people related to that one thing that happened right there. So we got into this asphalt business early in the 60s, but then my dad worked on this design in 1993, 94, and then that has become a major part of our business. So this is some of the equipment that we would sell to contractors and governments all over the world. 1997, we bought the Madison Avenue building. It was an old Cooper Steel Service Center. So we went to, the good story with that is Dick Weinzierl was with Cooper at the time, and my dad heard the building was for sale, went over, and Dick said, how much is, or my dad asked how much it was, and Dick said, oh, I don't remember now. And Dad said, great, sold. I mean, it was a handshake deal, and that was, and Cooper was a little, like, surprised, but that's the way my dad did business, and it was sold, done. So in 1998, really, we got moved into the building. This machine here took 40 man hours to put one machine together. And this building, in the year 2000, we were building 10 of those a week. So we had 25 people employed in that building, building that one machine. Basically.
What was the electronic technology in those machines? Was it mechanical relays or
No, it was a very
electronic?
early microprocessor. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Very early. It was pre-floppy drive. The next revision of the machine we did, the 94 machine didn't have a floppy drive, the 97 machine had a floppy in it, which are still in the field today, failing. And people can't buy floppy drives.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm skipping a lot of years there. But all these years, the same thing's going on. We're just still building circuit boards for people. We're still building asphalt equipment, still building the electrochemical equipment. But each year, we're just gaining in size. And so 2008, we built what we call Building 5, which is right next to Building 3. It's the one you mainly see now from Main Street when you drive by. And of course, the very first thing we did was we had a Christmas light. That's what we got the building. And then we were if you look, let me jump ahead a second. I'm going to jump ahead a couple over here. I'm going to jump ahead there. Oops. Oh, I see. I showed my last slide and I didn't want to do that. Okay. So 2008, we started building this building right here. And then you've driven by our big field. Okay, so we had Madison Avenue at the time. And so we were planning to build a building right here to bring Madison Avenue processes over. But then Lesser Lumber closed. And so, there it is. We walked down to Lesser Lumber. This is the day we're walking down. Dad and I were walking down to Lesser Lumber, and I took a picture because I know he's going to buy the building on a handshake. And sure enough, we walked down to Lesser Lumber, and this is what it is, and okay, we're buying it. And we bought Lesser Lumber. And then we had to do a whole lot of renovation inside there, so it was December of 9, we had another Christmas party night. And then we didn't get moved in until midsummer because we had so much work to do to get it ready. A lot of the floors weren't thick enough for our industrial equipment, so we had to thicken up a lot of the floors. So, and then this is my two boys as we were moving stuff over into that building. And then this is the Main Street building coming, the two-story building facing Burger King coming down. That occurred in 2010. And you can, we had a stop no admittance sign, and that was the only thing standing after the building was all crushed. And again, here's the view of it. So this is, here's Burger King, here's the church, and this is Armstrong Cable, and then you have all of GE up there. So we have our 72, 87, 08, and 09.
What
And we
was
still
the
have our big
story-
field.
What was the story about the real estate office that they wouldn't give in, they wouldn't allow you to acquire that corner property there?
This one here.
Yeah.
So,
Your dad told me
Henry
that he
Moore.
wanted to buy that.
Henry Moore
Yeah.
Law Office was right here. And we're all zoned industrial, and this little corner is zoned, I think, commercial. And he did not want to change his zoning, because when he changed his zoning, he would lose certain elements. I can't remember the exact story about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So now Howard Hanna owns that. They rented it from the Moores for many years, but then they recently purchased it. Yeah. But that's one of those unique Grove City things, because sort of the back corner of the gutter belongs to Pine, because everything was right on the edge of the gutter and things like that. So we have the same thing here. Our electrical transformer, if you drew the line where it was supposed to be a little bit of the concrete pad for the electrical transformer sitting on GE's property, everything was, how they were sort of squeezed together. So this piece right here is the piece my dad owned. And they wanted that for the GE property. So they bought this chunk right here, and they made a trade. And there's my final shot. So thank you from the Hines family to my parents. This is pre-kids. Floating in the lake. And then this is the first Pine van with my sisters and I in my nice hat. And then these are my two boys when we were building what we call Building 5. Standing out in front.
What lake was that?
What was the lake? What lake?
One of the 10,000 lakes in Minnesota.
Oh.
Lake Huron.
I'm thinking, no, it didn't look like snow.
So I know I sort of breezed through a lot of things there, but I didn't want to make it super long, but I wanted to sort of step through the different years. So a couple of things I wanted to so the parts you saw passed around in the little cups. So this is what we start with. So we'll order boards in. This is 5 of the same board in the panel. And all the little parts that are in the cups will end up getting populated on the board. So here you've got, these are all little LED lights. And then there's different connectors here on the back. So this board here would then be produced in our shop. And then that board ends up installed in this lid with all the switches, and you can see on top here all the little holes where the LED lights would come through. So again, this would be, this is Catron. They were in Sharpsville, they're over in Warren, Ohio. But this is their design. This is a controller, so a person in a rail yard wears this and they're controlling locomotives in the rail yard. So we make this box, and then we also made another box that went inside the engine. And then these 2 boxes would communicate with each other. And again, all their design, we're just executing all the work for them. So we buy all the parts, and people cut all the wires and put all the little connectors on and solder everything together and put this together. Yeah.
Is that new?
Is it new? No, it's used. Well, not used, but it's an old design, so they don't use it anymore. So I can play with it. Yeah. So that gives you just a sense of, this is what we really like to do for a customer. They design a product, they give us the whole bills of material for it, and then we buy all the parts, buy all the enclosure, all the switches, everything that's needed, and then we can put the whole thing together. And then they'll take this into their facility. So we'll run a test on that board independently. It may just get powered at our facility just to make sure the lights come on. But they'll have software in there that they want to protect. They don't want to give that code to anybody else. So they don't program this thing till it gets to their facility, because they want to hold their intellectual property. So that sort of goes to, someone say, well, don't you compete with China? And some of the reasons we don't compete with China is people don't want to send their intellectual property offshore. They don't want to send it to Mexico or Canada or anywhere else. So they'll use companies like Hines to build their products because their intellectual property stays domestic. And then also they don't have to give everything to us. They can give us part of it so that we know enough to make the product and to do some testing to it, but then we don't make all of it. But then also they don't have to buy 10,000 of these and ship them over on a ship. They can order 100 of them from us. And so we do the same things that would be done offshore. We do them in a lot smaller quantity. We'll do them more frequently. And a lot of times we'll be holding some intellectual property that they don't want to release to other people. So we do all kinds of different boards. This is an example of, here's a board. So we populate this, and this board's all surface mount, which means the parts are all sitting on the top. This will be populated by a sort of a robotic machine, and then it gets reflowed, and the solder gets reflowed to all the parts. This gets inserted into this case, and then this case, the label's over top of the hole, it's injected with rubber. So this whole thing is full of rubber. So this is the modern version of what we used to do like this. So it's all encased. So this would be for JLG, the boom lift people. This would be, because it's outdoors all the time, this would be a module plugged in to their electronic system. So we'll do things for JLG like this. We'll make 5 versions of the same product. It's just populated differently. That means it has less features or more features related to the product. We've done this. JLG made a bunch of gray forklifts for the military. And so we populated this in a different way and got a different label on it. And then they were sticking that into one of the military applications. Here's an example of some boards on the back. And you've all seen the push buttons. You know, the push buttons are just a little piece sitting behind the board. I don't think I brought one with me that has a push button exposed. But it's if you take anything at home apart, you're going to see that. You'll see circuit boards back there, and there'll be push buttons on the front. And this is a wire harness. So this will be, I'm going to guess, I don't know what this is for sure. We make the braking systems for subways. So Westinghouse Air Brake makes the undercarriage of the New York City subway. Kawasaki makes the box that's on top that you sit in. We make the circuit boards that control the brakes of that subway system. So we have a black box that'll have a bunch of circuit boards in it. And then we build this wire harness which plugs each board in, and these are coming out the end of the box. And then there's a big wire harness in the car that plugs into these, and then it links every car together and controls all the brakes. But we'll build this here in Grove City. Again, they're not buying volumes that necessitate going to Asia, because they might buy 50 of these, you know. And so someone sits down and painstakingly goes through and builds this wire harness. We made a harness for the People Mover in Miami. And it took one person 10 hours to make the harness that went inside the box. Like that. So that's a lot of the labor we're doing in Grove City. Most of our labor force is trained on the job. Who learns how to do this somewhere else, right? So we test for aptitude, for ability to follow directions, and then we just have tons of directions, and people build up different kind of harnesses and different kind of boards. Of course, we still have machining. So, you know, just some examples of some of the machining we do. All of the machining we do today is for our own products. We don't machine for other people's products anymore. We reserve all our machining for ourselves. And this is just another example of circuit board. You can pick these up and look at them. Here's a couple of parts that go inside those electrodes, that electrode that I passed around. This would be the part that thing starts as. This stainless steel shaft is inside that thing. Now, the interesting part about that thing is so you have the stainless steel, and then you're going to have the white Teflon on the stainless, and on the end of it is the glassy carbon, and then there's a gold ring around it, and more Teflon around it, and there's no glue, and it doesn't leak. The technicians polish every single part going together, and then we use heat and cold to change the size of the parts, and we fit them all together, and then they get polished down to about a 600 micron finish, and then scientists are able to use them for the work they're doing. But each one of those is really, this is a mass-produced part, and that electrode is one of a kind, because every one of them is uniquely polished, every piece, to make sure it fits perfectly together. I mean, they're unique in that there are a half a thousandths difference. I mean, unique is relative, but they are custom made by a machinist in Grove City here. So, any questions on anything? Yeah.
How many engineers do you have on staff?
So we have in Grove City, we have two electrical engineers, 2 mechanical engineers, and in North Carolina, we have a mechanical, 2 electricals, and then in addition we have 5 chemists, a mathematician, and a physicist.
The Carolina office, is that included in your 115?
Yes, there's 15 there. So there's 100 Grove City. Oh, really? There's 99 Grove City, and there's 1 guy in Pittsburgh. So when my dad started the software writing process, he acquired a 2-man operation in Pittsburgh to help with development of this. And one of the guys that worked there still lives down there, and so we rent an office so that he doesn't have to commute to Grove City, because the office closed at some point. So we have 1 guy in Pittsburgh, 99 in Grove City, and 15 in North Carolina. All the people in North Carolina are either chemists or engineers or sales. And really all of our sales are done by engineers or chemists. So we pretty much use technical people for all of our sales positions, because we're dealing with very technical customers.
What's the reason that they're down in North Carolina?
All right, so electrochemistry has 3 main hubs in the United States. Case Western in Cleveland, Texas A&M, and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So Frank Dalton, who's the general manager, was living in Grove City, and we knew we wanted to expand that business, but recruiting in Grove City is very difficult. Recruiting people to come from outside of Grove City into Grove City is very difficult. So Frank had his choice. He could go to Cleveland, which got rolled out pretty quick. He could go to Texas. He grew up in Texas, so that wasn't a bad choice. But he met his wife and he got his doctorate in North Carolina. So North Carolina is where he went. So that's how we ended up in North Carolina. So that office there, we have 6 PhDs in that office, and we would have never recruited them to Grove City. And so you had to be in a location where you could recruit. Most of them are former professors that taught electrochemistry, or taught material science, or taught physics, taught mathematics, and so you had to be in an environment where you can attract those kind of people, because they're the ones that have the know-how of developing the software that needs for that instrumentation. So we make all the instruments here in Grove City, but North Carolina has the engineering and the sales.
That's one question.
Go right ahead.
How about your new product development? How do you do that? Where's that based?
So North Carolina does all of the eChem product development there. So because they're all former users, they they're talking with their peers. So they're developing product specs for new development. And then we have our engineering team there that does the development.
So your marketing people in there also?
Yes, yes. And they're sort of one and the same. All of our chemists are chemists and marketing people.
How about competitors?
Competitors in the e-chem world, there's about 40, and they're scattered all over the world. We are one of the largest in the e-chem world. Because my dad was in the posters out here to show you, because my dad was early in the e-chem development process, Pine was really the only one in the game until into the 80s. So that helped Pine gain a lot of momentum. On the asphalt side, we have one competitor in the U.S. that makes the same machine as we do. There are some others in the world, maybe 4. But really the U.S., the asphalt industry is a very, very U.S. industry. Like, they drive Fords. Like, they don't buy foreign cars, even though they might be made in Ohio. You know what I mean? Kind of the asphalt industry is really about, we're buying American, and so we don't have much foreign competition in the asphalt world because it's very much a let's buy American kind of thing in that world. But the e-chem world, the chemists are all over the world. Someone from Pakistan gets educated in England and then ends up moving to Africa, and so it's so blended that it doesn't really matter where you're selling from, because customers come from everywhere and move all over the place. The contract electronics part is very regional, because the engineers at the company that are designing the product like to come see it being built. So you don't end up with customers out of California, because that just makes the relationship too difficult. They like to be nice and handy.
You still make products for Joy?
Very few. Very few.
They have theirs made other places?
Yes, yes. So we try very hard. Pine, and my parents started this a long time ago. Our shop employees can work up to 10 hours a day, so they only have to work 4 days a week, but we're open 5 days a week. So our hourly employees can work 8 hours on Monday and 6 hours on Tuesday and 10 hours on Wednesday, and mix their days all up. And we have employees that go to every high school soccer game because their kids playing soccer, and then they come back to work after the soccer game. So we have a lot of flexibility in that. So we look for very particular customers, because we don't want customers that give us very little time to accomplish something and don't give us very much vision into the future. We want someone that says, I want 1,000 of these over the next 10 months, and I'm going to take 100 a month. We go buy all the material, and then we build them ahead of what they anticipate needing them for, but that way we can build them at our pace. And employees, no 2 employees will do the same process on a job, which means someone can start and stop what they're doing and not affect anybody else. So you can start a job and it might take me 10 hours to do it. I'm going to do 5 of it today and 5 hours of it tomorrow. And I don't have to worry about transitioning the job I'm doing to the next person midstream. So that allows us a lot of flexibility for the employees, but it really limits our customers. Because there's a lot of customers that look for, I need this board in 2 weeks.
Is Joy
There
that-
are other companies that do
Was
that.
was Joy that way?
They had
Well,
bad people telling them what to do.
Part of what Joy's system was that they wanted us to do more things than we wanted to do. They were going to ask us to do things that made us go beyond the culture we wanted to have. And so we try to be we've been very blessed, because we find customers that are willing to work with the way we like to work.
Must be a precarious business model, though. I mean, how can you predict stuff when you don't have some sort of a 12-month?
Most people give us
Order.
12 months of orders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we already, well, So for the asphalt products ourselves, for the stuff we make for asphalt, we already know what we're making in 2019. All of 2019 is already planned. We are already ordering material for stuff to be built in 2019. The electrochemical product is the same thing. We plan 6, 9, 12 months in advance. The other customers we have them because they like to give us that kind of information. They're in that same sort of repeat world, and so they'll say, okay, I expect to buy 1,000 of them over the next year. And they'll give us a purchase order that lets us plan that out. If we had customers that only gave us little snippets, we couldn't operate the way we do.
Yeah, that's what I was, but I met with your dad once a week for, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. And it was my impression that it's fairly stable business. I mean, everybody had some ups and downs, but there weren't massive layoffs and massive hirings and all this kind of stuff going on.
Right.
Massive in the context
Right.
of your operation. So I always wondered how you managed that.
Right, it's
With a
finding
small business like
it's
that.
finding the right work to do. And that's a huge part of it. We don't take work that will change the way we do things. We really like the flex time we have. We call it flex time. Mimi worked in our flex time for many years. And that's a great asset for everyone that's there. If you want to take a 2-hour lunch and go to the school to read a book to your kids' class, you just go right ahead and do that. You know, so it gives all
I
that.
actually had the impression, if I can be so bold as to say that the Lord was in it because of the family and human element in the management. It wasn't all about bucks.
I can't explain all the success we have.
Yeah,
You know, one time my dad and I were so we'll do on occasion big bids for, you know, several $1 million worth of asphalt equipment, and it's always just what number do you pick, you know, because you're competing and you want to make sure you know. And so I'm a very concrete person, and I have to have a formula for just about everything in my life. And so I had developed 3 or 4 formulas to give me a price for this bid, and I had the numbers written on a sheet of paper, and we were sitting in Citizens Bank drive-through one day after eating lunch together, and I said, Dad, which number do we pick? And he said, oh, I like that number. So that's the number we bid. And we won by like $50 a unit over a multi-million-dollar contract. But, you know, it's kind of that, you know, don't overthink it or whatever, just sort of relying on the Lord to sort of bring it along. And I did the math from day one till the end of last year. We've certainly had our ups and down years, you know, nothing drastic. But if you do the math over that entire time frame, we've grown 14% a year, every single year. Now, certainly there have been years that are down. But if you do the math, it's 14% a year for 56 years.
yeah. When you think of all the business that happened in the post 2008 after it hit the fan in 2008, you've been relatively stable.
2008 and 2009 were 2 of our best years. We have customers that build subways and build power grid equipment and build roads. Government didn't stop spending money in 2008 and 2009. Government kept going. The subway upgrade system doesn't stop, you know. So all this work just kept going, you know. We had other customers who went down. It's not like, you know, but we had 2 very good years in there because the government didn't slow down all these projects that were going on. So we were able to just keep going. It was a little nerve-wracking, but
Have you noticed any difference in the last 2 years? Anything happened in the last 2 years?
we've all heard about tariffs, right? We are paying tariffs. It happening to us right now. We are parts that go into this circuit board are coming in from China and they have a tariff on them. And we're paying that tariff and we're passing the tariff right along to the next customer. I had a conversation with a supplier that makes machine parts for us, and I was asking, so in the electronics world, everyone is putting tariffs on a separate line of the bill. Parts, freight, tariff. Clearly outlined. Because in the electronics world, it's very tight. You know, people are arguing over pennies. And so if there's a $10 tariff, they don't want to, if you put it up in the price line, people start arguing about it. If you put it in the tariff line, no one argues. You know, it's the tariff. I can't do anything about that. You can argue with me about shipping, you can argue with me about the price of the part, but you can't argue with me about tariff. So in the electronics world, it's being very detailed. In the steel world, what is happening is we just placed a big order for a bunch of steel parts for 2019, and our prices all went up. And I said, is that tariff related? And he said, well, I can't really tell you that because the foreign steel went up in price because it now has a tariff on it. And the U.S. steel manufacturers just raised their price to match it. So we're just paying more money. Is it because of tariff? Yes, because the tariffs allowed the U.S. price to come up higher. But we may not be paying a tariff if we're not buying foreign steel, but we don't really know that. We're just buying the steel at a new price.
So is your business getting better?
Pardon me?
I said, part of that question is your business getting better in the last couple of years? Are you seeing more volume?
We define better not by volume or dollars. We define better in the health of our jobs. So, yes, our jobs are healthier. We've all seen healthcare going up and up and up. And we continue to provide good healthcare to all of our employees.
Your operational definition of your business health is what?
5 things.
Okay.
Lead with compassion. Follow with respect. Interact with integrity. Labor with diligence. And invest with wisdom. And you'll have success. We don't have financial goals. I don't have a sales goal. I don't have a profit goal. And every year we pay profit share, and every year we provide health care, and every year we tend to pay all of our taxes. If you're not paying taxes, you're not making money. If you're paying more taxes, you're making more money. And that's why I don't know how this is all happening. I mean, I can understand why it's all happening. But we put people first. Every single person in our business leads because you're leading the person that's next to you because you know something they don't know. And you're following that person because they know something you don't know. So you need to follow them with respect. You need to lead them with compassion. You both need to interact with integrity. You know, so it's all, that's how we roll the whole thing together. I found an article that my dad had pulled out of the newspaper back in the 70s, I think it was. And there was Instron and Pine both had an article in the newspaper on the same day. And Instron was talking about the great sales and profit records they were having. And Pine was talking about the health of its employees. And my dad wrote a note at the bottom that says, I guess we watch different things. You know, so that he's been running the business that way the whole time. You know, and so that's how it works. It's successful right now. You know. Anything else?
I'd like to congratulate you, Hines, and say that you give Grove City a lot of reason to be proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That was such an interesting presentation, and I don't know if I can speak for other ones in the room, but I learned so much, and I had no idea the vast products that you made and how intricate and how, you know, scientific and it was, you know, so that is something to be very proud of in our town. So it's, Joe and is going to be here for a little while. So if you have any other questions, join us for punch and cookies. And in 2 weeks, on Monday, October 1st, will be our next fall series speaker, and he will be speaking on Camp Reynolds. which is going to be very interesting in that I think a lot of people didn't know that we actually had German POWs at Camp Reynolds during the Second World War, and he's going to tell us all about the soldiers there and the camp there. So please mark your calendars to join us then. So thank you so much.